Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is Bryan CP Steele, and I will be your nerd today, and any day that you watch any of these videos. Hi. Let's get down to business. Let's talk about the week in Bryan. But actually, before we get to the week in Bryan, let's look at my sponsor, the Armor Class 10 T-shirt and apparel company. Let's take a look at their T-shirt of the week. We have a "Because no one wants to play papers and paychecks." It's a nice way of saying that role-playing, like I've said on this channel since the very first episode, is gaming and role-playing and all that is a fantastic way of getting away from the doldrums of everyday life and the hecticness that we have to deal with all the time, that real life sometimes can be a drag. And getting to play Mazes and Monsters or Dungeons and Dragons or other alliteration plus alliteration gets us away from having to play papers and paychecks. That's what this t-shirt's about. This t-shirt is the irony of that we don't want to play a game that is basically real life. It also will tie in today's episode as well. But let's before we get into the episode itself, let's take a look at the week in Bryan. It's been a good week. It's been a solid week. A lot of work toward my Dungeon in a Box gig that I've been recently working on. Getting some edits taken care of on that. I always like talking with the owner of that company, David Crennan. I like talking with him about the plot and where the story is going, and I learned some really cool stuff from that company coming down the road that I guarantee I'll be spouting off about in the future. But right now, it is just a matter of nothing set in stone, so I can't really say anything. I do want to give them a quick little shout out. Their Kickstarter, which I believe ends in the next couple of days, for their skinny minis, the acrylic flat pack style standees of monsters and critters and NPCs and whatnot, and heroes as well. I want to say, excuse me, that their Kickstarter, I want to say, just rounded $500,000, and I found out today when I was talking to David that that's actually their program. Like, that's actually their software, their printing ability. They're creating the actual products. It's not an outsourcing sort of thing. So my hat is off to them. Not that I wear a hat when I record anyway, but I'm super proud of them. As a company, I know there are a handful of people that they're not like one of the giant conglomerates that you see that score these gigantic, Kickstarter reapings. But they've got a cool product. I'll put the address in there, even though that I know that eventually it will no longer be valid for people to click on. At least in the next couple of days, you should be able to get in there and back them, because it's a really cool product. I love them. I know I backed it, and to know that it is not just David's not just being a middleman, that is actually his idea to do this and to create these figures, skinny minis. I got to give him some kudos and hopefully send some business his way. So I wanted to just take a quick second to talk about that. Work wise, I've been doing a lot of painting. Signed on another commission that I need to get cracking on. I need to get caught up on some of my other stuff too. But I also, this week, had two, I'm going to say successful because although we haven't set it up in stone yet as to what's going on, but two gaming products. One is an encapsulated game in and of itself, and the other is a product that kind of goes along with another game. I know I'm being vague, but that's because until things get contracted and gelled, I don't want to say one way or another. But I pitched two game assets to my bosses at Big Child Creatives, and they sound extremely happy with what I'm putting together. And started the preliminary design and numbers work on the encapsulated game. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to playtest that. Excuse the cough. I have been fighting a lung thing for the last couple of days. I was kind of hoping to be able to shake it for the video, but I'm sure I'll be coughing at you a couple of times here and there. But yeah, so when that kind of becomes more of a thing, or if I start needing playtesters, leave some information if you've got a decent playtest group in your local neck of the woods that can give me detailed results and on time, in a timely fashion, after playing multiple games, not just eyeballing the rulebook and going, this is what I think because I'm the coolest. Then drop me a comment and we'll try and work something out. But up until then, just drop me a comment anyway. I love reading them. I love hearing them. Anytime my phone does a little chirp, YouTube's talking to you. I always hope that it's a viewer that's got a question or a subscriber that's like, hey, this is a really cool thing. So keep them coming. I know that the channel is slowly growing. We are just about to 200 subscribers at this point. I hope that we will continue to grow. We will continue to see more people come and listen to my madness, and hopefully, as things progress, we'll have more and better reasons to get together and talk about cool stuff. So that's a lot of what I did this week. I know that's not super exciting. Last weekend, I had said that I had some really cool role-playing stuff happen. I got to run my D&D game for my family, my two kids and my wife and my son's godfather. For the first time, we ran for about... the session ran for about 4.5 hours. I'm going to say we got about 3 hours of actual gameplay in. Because of questions and what we have come to term shenanigans at the table, where it's just you're not really gaming, you're just sort of chit chatting and talking about this, that, and the other thing, or hey, give me those potato chips or whatever. I'd say we probably about 3.5 real hours of gaming in. And the kids had a good time. I believe my wife had a good time. I know that David had a good time, that my son's godfather. It's a basic story. These heroes from a relatively agriculturally sound area agree to hire on to escort a caravan from point A to point B. Point B being the big city. And along the way, they discover a farm has been sacked by goblins, and they go and they're searching out the goblins to see if they can't find the farmers, and try and do some good in this savage world. And they had a good time. I can tell that it's going to be a little bit of a growing process for at least one of the children. Both kids were doing this thing that outsider looking in, I guess I never realized, and I don't ever remember doing it, but I do know that a lot of times when people role play, instead of just playing their character and just saying what their character says or going, hey, I say blah blah blah, They do everything kind of third person omniscient, and so instead of just being like, I'm running over and checking the barn, it is my character will go over to the barn and look around. Or in the case of the turn of phrase that kept popping up at the game, and eventually I did have to kind of say, I was like, guys, you don't have to say that. We understand that you as a person are not going to run over and stab a goblin because there are no goblins in my dining room. But they kept saying, I choose to do this. I choose to do this. I choose to investigate the kitchen. I choose to say this. And it's cute. It's cute. They're new to this. And I think part of it is because I sold them on the idea of D&D growing up, is that it was kind of like a choose your own adventure book. And I use that term quite a bit, is that you're part of a story, you're part of this greater thing, but you get to make the choices for your characters. You choose what they do. And I think that we may have just kind of hammered that in just a little bit too far, because they literally verbally chose to do something every time they did it, and it was fun. I'm looking forward to furthering out to playing again. For those people out there who don't play D&D 5th Ed, one of the things that players can do in circumstances where their attack brings something's hit points to 0, and it is not something along the lines of, oh, I threw them off of a cliff, or, oh, I hit them with a lightning bolt, or something along those lines, the player always gets the opportunity to say, I'm rendering them unconscious, I'm not killing them. This is not a killing blow. I'm trying to take prisoners, or do the right thing, these guys are just hungry thugs, or whatever. And for the most part, I remember when I was growing up, my first forays into D&D, if someone was like, there's a goblin in front of you, I'm like, well, my dwarf picks it up with an axe and I take it down, chip chop. That's it. And if somebody looked at me and was like, do you want to take him alive? At 10 years old, I would have been like, do you want to pick the meaty goblin salsa off the floor? Because that's what's happening. Because there's no way, unless someone at the table was specifically like, hey, we need to take one alive, I would never have thought about that. Very, very video gamey in my head. Press button, kill goblin. And we got into an ambush sort of scenario that where the heroes, as they are, kind of came down upon an unsuspecting small group of goblins and one leader who was slightly bigger than the other goblins. And they, one of their party members was going to attempt to parlay. He was going to attempt to try and talk, hey, let's have a little chit chat here. Greetings. And as the initiative turned out, and because the heroes had not really discussed what they were going to do before this, other than we're going to go down and deal with these goblins, the second person to act was my son Connor's character, an elf named Ivelios, who he's made a like an archer fighter. and he's like, all right, well, I shoot I'm gonna crack myself up here because David's character walks forward and he was like, greetings, and all the goblins are freaked out. What's going on? And the next person in the initiative is Connor, and he just goes, all right, well, I shoot the leader. And I'm like, all right, so that's what I assumed. Again, you set up a fight, you set up a combat, you're pretty sure it's going to end up being combat, especially when you've got relatively new players and they've been itching for a scrap the whole session. So Connor's like, all right, well, I shoot the leader, and I'm like, okay, well, you're well within range. So for all the rules, and he goes to roll his attack and crits him on the first die roll that he ever rolls, and so does a copious amount of damage. And that was when I reminded, I was like, oh, hey, in D&D, any time that you bring a target feasibly to 0 hit points, and there is a way for you to describe not a killing blow, you don't have to kill them. You can take them prisoner, or you can knock them out and see what happens. And I expected, there was a part of me, I expected my video game Minecraft Roblox playing kid to go, oh, no, I shoot him right in the eye, he's done. Instead, he pulled a Skyrim on me and goes, I shoot him in the knee, I knock him out. And so, the rest of combat ensues or whatever, and we ended up the game session up on, basically, they've killed everything else that was there except for this leader guy, who they specifically wanted to, Connor wanted to take him alive so they could ask him what happened with the farm and ask him questions, because, as Connor put it, he was the only one that spoke English, common, but because I had made it a point of being none of the characters can speak Goblin, and I had made a point of that the leader says something while they're walking in, says something that in English, or in common. And Connor picked up on that, knows that guy, that they can communicate with that guy, and was like, nope, we're going to take him alive. And I had a proud daddy moment. So had my proud daddy moment during the day on that Saturday running the game. And then Saturday night, I played some D&D with my buddies down in Indianapolis. Had a great time, not just playing the game, but also... Albert made an amazing pot of chili. I brought some salsa. Brian Martin brought one of the other guys. Just giving you names. Here you go. One of the other guys that we game with, he brought a giant meat and cheese plate. It was a good night out. I had mentioned last week that I had been pretty stressed. That the world has been pretty heavy on my shoulders for the last couple months, and last week was no exception. So that last weekend, getting to run a game for my family, and then go and get out and stretch my legs and play a game with my friends, and then on Sunday I went and played in a Night Models Batman miniatures game tournament. Got my butt kicked. I won 1 out of 3 games. But learned a lot about the new force that I was fielding, and reminded myself how much I love that system, the Batman miniatures game system. I'm a little concerned. They've announced that they're putting out a 3rd edition, probably, I'm assuming, spring of next year. And I've heard a few whispers of some of the things that they're doing. Hoping that they don't get too far away from the original feel of the game, because it is such a good game. And the models are gorgeous, and obviously I love the subject matter. It's DC Comics. I'm looking forward to getting some bonus points and some stuff at the local store, the local game store, because they're holding a very cool crew box for me that I'm not gonna tell people about. Maybe I'll make it a hobby section, or it's an obscure thing that I'm kind of surprised that Night Models made, but it'll be super fun to paint and hopefully to play. All right, yeah. So that was my weekend, and then I went right into the week of finishing up on the Dungeon in a Box and pitching that stuff for Big Child, hopefully setting up the groundwork for a very cool agreement between a distribution channel and Big Child Creative, so they'll start carrying our stuff. It's been a good week. Had a really solid meeting with my Crafty Games guys. Again, good week in Bryan. I'm feeling a lot of that super heavy stress melt away. I mean, there's still a lot there. Money being what money is. It's always the root of evils. But I'm feeling good, and I know that there's a definite light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So, Which brings me to today's topic. So today's topic, I kind of came from um, over the last couple of weeks, aside from this cool T-shirt, um, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of different gaming networks and Facebook groups and individual people who I really do like kind of watch them because they speak like I think about a lot of these topics, or they speak openly about things that maybe I'm not quite so brave about wanting to put my feelings out there in the world for the world to see. About I'm calling so today's thing is about, I call it the Great Wage Debate. And there's a lot of facets to it that in our industry, and I'm probably going to say some things. I apologize ahead of time for anybody who watches this or whatnot who may disagree with some of my stances, some of my opinions, but really today I'm going to go, today's going to be very opinion based, very editorial, because with a few facts here and there sprinkled in for good measure, most of what I have to say today is kind of the opinion, my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of those around me that I've kind of harvested from. I'm not going to quote anybody. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. I'm not going to talk about particular companies that I've worked for, just because I think that also could be seen in bad taste. If I came on here and was like, well, this company paid me this, and this company paid me that, and this company, I know that it's considered open information in a lot of cases, and it can be helpful for people to know what they're getting into. But I don't know. I have always, even when I was making my absolute most money at my most lucrative job that I've ever been at, I've always been weird about talking about how much money I am making or not making, with friends or family or strangers. It has always been a weird thing to me, and I've got several friends that are completely just cards on the table open about it. I make this much money, or I make this much a month, or remember when I only made this much a month. I have never been that comfortable talking about money, whether it is I don't want to feel ashamed that I'm not making enough, or I don't want someone else to feel bad that they're making less than I am, or I don't want to feel like I'm bragging about what money I'm making on effectively my dream job, because there's a big factor there. I will forgive a lot more hardship and difficulty in an industry and in a job that I love wholeheartedly than I would doing the exact same thing just to make ends meet at a gig that I didn't care about. I'm more likely to be like, oh man, that sucks. This wage is terrible if I was out, slinging insurance rates at a cube job than I am doing the exact same thing here in my own studio. Which, if you want to think about it, the money shouldn't matter, or the where it's coming from shouldn't matter. Those numbers, are you making this much? Yes. Are you making this much? Yes. But the difference is whether or not I'm happy. And whether or not I'm feeling content enough with what I do and who I do it for, that at the end of the day, I don't want to wash my hands of the job and be like, oh, just be done. I don't want it on me anymore. And I remember old jobs like that. I remember having gigs way back in the day where it's like, when you got done, you got home, it was, don't talk to me about work. I don't even want to hear about it. Now I'm totally fine with it because I love what I do, and I have for the last 20 years. it's a little harder right now because the funds aren't coming in, super strong and steady. But, you know, it could be worse. And it could be that I'm that I'm struggling and suffering in a job that I don't want. So, I don't know, I kind of went on a tangent there. It's just basically, it comes down to, I've never been one to want to talk about how much collective money I'm making, for good or for bad. I've never been that kind of person, which makes discussing things like average industry wages and whatnot kind of difficult for me. So when I do see someone else that has picked up that flag and is running with it, I tend to listen. I tend to, stay involved in the conversation, maybe comment here and there, but overall I kind of stay sort of the information devourer, because I want to know what's going on. I want to know whether or not, am I the only one that's willing to take these jobs at these levels, or am I, is it weird when I see the occasional, I see somebody posting something about, well, yeah, I got this for this gig, and I look at it and go, that's an insane amount of money for something that I would have felt lucky doing at half rate. So it's a very interesting topic that can be very troubling, especially for people who are just starting out. It is very hard to know whether or not you're being taken advantage of, whether or not your work is worth the amount that you're being paid, and frankly, whether or not you are being told one thing about, like, hey, everybody in the industry pays this much, but then you talk to this guy and he's getting paid X or Y or whatever. So I do think that there is a place for these Facebook groups and these threads and these conversations to talk openly about what's happening to us in the industry. And it's okay to be upset, just like it's okay to understand your limitations, and to know that, yeah, there might be a company out there that advertises that they pay 7 cents a word every contract that they set up. It's okay to understand that is really weird, and I think that it's good to know, as a freelancer or as a worker in the industry, it's good to know that when said company looks at you and says, I can do 4 cents a word, what do you walk away from that because it's not enough, or do you realize that, no, that's pretty standard, like this company this size, product like this amount of work, I guess that makes sense, that sounds good. Whether or not a wage includes a signing bonus or a down payment on the estimated final work. There's all these different things that facet into how we get compensated. And I think in recent times, I'm going to say in the last 2 years, that one of the things that has really kind of shot the industry in the foot when it comes to, so I'm gonna get off topic a little bit, not really, it's on topic but off kilter. For a long time, nobody thought that anybody in the gaming industry made any money at all. we all did this because we did it because it was what we loved, and the companies that were making it, they didn't make money on their games. They made their money on licensing their products out to other people, or they made their money on the extra products on the side, with the exception of some products. For the most part, a lot of times people just sort of assumed that D&D books were operating at a loss. That it was a labor of love for a handful of people, and they were making enough money to keep the lights on, and that was about it. fast forward to the late '80s, early '90s when Magic the Gathering came out. When Magic came out, uh, I remember I remember the game stores initially being like, this is just a fad. It's like people are gonna buy through these cards. They're gonna find their first set, make their deck, and then that's all we're gonna see. Well, obviously that's not the case. The Magic the Gathering is now a multi-million-dollar uh, affair with bazillions of outlets and media and products, and they're talking about doing a Netflix show based off of the Planeswalkers. I mean, like, it's crazy. It's crazy how big it's gotten. But that means way back when the overall opinion was that Magic was going to be a flash in the pan, that it was going to go, all right, cool, we made our Magic money. Let's put these funds to something else, and that Magic wouldn't continue. You go back to look at those days, and the people working on those cards, the artists out making those cards, and the designers who were making the system, a lot of them were in house there at Wizards of the Coast, and they they were getting by. They were doing okay. Like, they were making a decent wage, but not like, almost all of them had second jobs. Almost all of them did sold their illustrations elsewhere. They had no idea they were sitting on a multi-million-dollar jackpot, and I can't help but wonder when it came around to the fact that someone realized, they're like, nah, Magic's not going anywhere. Like, the only way that Magic will stop selling and stop keeping a lot of stores open is if WotC, Wizards of the Coast, chooses to stop making Magic. Which, that seems to me like that is basically someone choosing to not make money. Be like, we've decided that profit is a terrible idea, and just stop. So you look at that stuff now, and getting on those teams, and getting illustration work, and I hope that they're getting paid well, because we can see the power and the influence that games like Magic and companies like WotC have on the industry as a whole, and retailers. I know for a fact that both of the retail stores here in town, if it wasn't for Magic sales, they would probably be on the edge of being able to stay open. And that's crazy. That's become their lifeblood. And luckily the industry has kind of ridden a lot of that wave, and then Pokemon added in, and then Yu-Gi-Oh, and then the role-playing surge happened. But I think for today's topic, the kind of freelance wages out there, the fact that companies currently, and I hate to sound like it, most companies do not want to pay what most writing-based industries view what our talent is worth. For instance, one of the recent groups I was in, a guy got on there and posted 4 or 5 different magazines. One was Rolling Stone, and one was not Washington Post, but it was similar, something like that, like a kind of an old timey, Farmer's Almanac style periodical, and like 2 others, and one of them paid like 24 cents a word for their articles, and that's like, if somebody in our industry would be like, hey, I'm starting a book and I'm going to pay publishing rates the same as magazines because I want that kind of quality, so here's 22 cents a word, it would be easily the most sought after gig anywhere, barring subject matter, anywhere in the industry. On average, to give you an idea, just going through the compilations, going through what people have said, on average, most companies in the gaming industry pay their freelancers roughly 4 cents a word. Erring closer to 3. Excuse me. I know for a fact that there are quite a few that pay 5. And I have at one time worked for someone who's paid as much as 7. So that gives you a pretty hefty range, between 3 cents and 7. Now, I do know that there are also some tiny companies out there that are like, we can afford to pay you 2.5 cents a word. That's super rare. For them not for it to not be even 3, that is very rare. And I hesitate to say that I think the industry standard probably has turned into about 3.5 cents a word. Now, there's always negotiations involved. No matter what someone says from a company level, if they looked at you and said, yep, this is what we pay, hard, fast, if they want your work, they're going to be willing to at least talk to you about it. Now, they might have an accounting firm that steps in and says, no, you don't, this this is how much we pay. But you might be able to wiggle in some other compensation in a different way. Say, okay, I'll take this amount of, I'll take your rates that you're saying is your standard, but I also want 10 copies of the product. Or I want, I want first crack at a sequel if there is one. So there's other things you can do, or figure out the estimated word count on the project and I get half up front. That's a big one that I do a lot. It keeps me from starving while I'm working on something, but also gives me a reason to push forward toward the end of a project. But the overall is obviously the companies, we live in a capitalistic society, and the industry is very capitalistic as well, in the way that there is this kind of thought process that the companies don't want to pay more. They don't want to pay more because it makes their books harder to be profitable. That makes their products harder to be profitable. But they also, that the company doesn't want to pay a ton less, because as soon as that kind of information comes out, you're not going to get any of the quality artists and writers and designers to come to see your market. If they know that you're this withered up, small company that's like, we can pay 2 cents hard and fast, you're not going to get very many offers from some of the big guys, which could help you in the long run because their names have recognition. They've got more talent, so it takes less they've got more experience and talent, so hopefully it will take less tweaking to make their stuff fit into your system. And hopefully they will do a lot more self-editing, so you won't have to pay an editor. Like, there's all these kinds of things that can be worked into a wage to make it fair. And I think that for the most part, the industry payment folk, like the people who are in charge of at the various companies, the payroll, the coffersmen, whatever you want to call them, I think that they, for the most part, they understand that. They know that that's the case. They know that when you look at them and say, can you do 3 cents instead of 2.5? They're not just trying to wring out money from you, because, at the end of the day, that's not that much money. Like, it really isn't. Even on a project that's 40, 50, 60,000 words, that's chump change compared to what you could be suffering if that work never gets done. And that's also not to say that artists and creatives and writers and developers should be jerks about it and be like, well, my stuff's worth way more than that, and you just can't. If that's the highest you can go, well, then, that's not going to work for me. Have a good system in place where you're like, let's negotiate, let's talk. Because otherwise, what ends up happening is you get people who get passed up for gigs, or later on they do the gig, but because they got paid so little compared to what they felt they were deserved, they go around running their mouth about the company, about the project, about the maybe the puzzle person, whoever set up the gig, These are things that could injure you in the long run from a reputation stake. You don't. It's okay to be the squeaky wheel. It's different to be the one that completely handicaps the cart. And I think that it should be a nice mix. Don't be afraid to tell the main boss or whoever's in charge of a project. Don't be afraid to tell them, hey, this part isn't working. You're spending more money than you need to because we can do this. Or looking at them and saying, I know that my work is worth more than this, but if you can't get that amount, if you can't get that 4 cents, or you can't get that 5 cents a word, that we need you to go ahead and deal with the fact that I am going to be selling my hand-drawn maps of the wilderness or whatever to help pad that salary. Or you're going to need to come up with some incentive, whether it's royalties or a bonus should we get it done before deadline time, or whatever the case may be. These wages, it is nice to have your feelings observed and to know your wants and desires out of a job. But really, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're being taken care of. You want to make sure that you're not taking advantage of the company and the company's not taking advantage of you. Let's see, what else? Where else we're going? Oh, so one of the other things that I tie it into the wage war, because a lot of times when people will say, well, if you don't, so there's a general fear in our industry. We are ruled by fear. I need to take a sip real quick. We are ruled by the fear of, if a company doesn't agree, or if I don't agree to the company's terms, that they are going to bounce us, because there are more than likely dozens, if not hundreds, of other people out there that want my job, that would love to take over for that contract, that would love to get paid for working in the gaming industry. And while they probably do not have the same experience, and they do not have the same work ethic when it comes to certain particular projects, or really maybe the exposure to the different game systems that you're going to be talking about, or whatever, they're still there, and they're still in the waiting room, so to speak, should something go wrong with you and your employer. And taking a lesser wage, maybe not a cripplingly low wage, but even just smaller. Like, on average, I'm at a point in my life where I get between 5 and 7 cents a word when I hire on for most clientele. There have been instances where that's not the case, and someone has, because they didn't know that that's what I do, they don't know that that's what I'm worth, they came at me, effectively, wanting to try and ambush me for a lesser rate, because, well, you want to be part of this, IP, it's going to happen. And I could have folded. I could have easily been like, oh, you know what, you're right, I need to be on this project. It's worth it's worth losing out a couple of pennies. But that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't even actually help the company. Yeah, it might save the company a couple $1,000, but my work is going to be less. I'm going to be constantly reminded that I've got this other thing going on. On top of that, there's going to be the fact that there might be other people on the project that are making more or less than you, that you don't want to be part of that bargaining chip. You don't want it to go back and forth. You don't want it to blow up in your face. So you look at it and go, all right, well, I guess I will take this amount, this offer, or at least counter offer. At least be like, well, you know what, I don't want to take 2, but I'll take 3.5, or I'll take 4. And they go, well, we don't want to do 4, we'll do 3. And you go, how about meet you in the middle at 3.5? Like you can find ways to make that wage conversation work. And really only the most like set to their ways, refused, like their company has been around long enough, or they're staffed by people who just simply refuse to discuss the changing of anything that's not owned by the company itself. It's this other person's rate, or this other person's project. We're coming in and we're making all these shifts and these adjustments. That I think that most companies would just shy away from it. They just would be like, nope, we're not even gonna mess with it. But like every once in a while, you might run into somebody who wants to be daring, who wants to try for you to do this thing, or we're willing to do this thing. And if you can, as a worker, if you can figure out how to make that work for you and make it work for the employer, and not turn it into I can't believe I'm only making 3.5 cents, turning it into, I'm making 3.5 cents to be a part of a project that I know is going to be really good for me, and possibly lead into further work and larger work down the road. I think that's a much better stance to take than, woe is me, this company's extorting me for 3.5 cents a word. The big thing, I think, that has become a lot of people in the last 2 years have become aware that some game companies are making a lot of money. And they're becoming aware of that because some of these game companies are using Kickstarter to sell some of their primary products. And what that does is that it means that I can look at a business and go, 10 years ago I look at a business and go, hey, how are you doing? And they go, well, we've got out these 5 products. They seem to be doing well. And that's really it. You could ask your local store, hey, did you have any copies of this? You could even, if you've got an in at like Alliance or ACD, you could get a hold of them and say, hey, how many copies of this thing have you seen coming and going? Kind of get an idea of just how realistic is this product. And at the end of the day, when you get all your information and this individual comes to try and make the deal, you could easily look at them and say, yeah, there's no way we can't abide by this, because I know that you say that your guy will make them cheaper or whatever, but that's not doing my personal brand and my work. It's doing a disservice. It's the you got to be able to. You have to be able to understand just how much what you're doing is worth to the overall product, before you start coming swinging at the company that's trying to hire you, or the company you're trying to get hired with. One of the other things that I think Kickstarter has shown is that sometimes you don't need to have the big names attached to a project, so long as it's got a bigger name at the up and up, that you ought to be able to go to a company that says, hey, you've made $20 million in your last 6 months in your Kickstarter. And yeah, I know a lot of that is assigned to, making the product or whatever, but you can't feasibly say that there's not a profit involved. And so you look at them and say, I think as that I'm part of this project that's making you $22 million or a fraction therein, I think that I'm worth a 1 cent raise or something along those lines. It gives you a foothold, but it also gives the fans something to see, that they suddenly believe that, oh, well, you as a writer, you were attached to this $11 million Kickstarter. the writers saw almost, other than their wages and their salary, probably saw nothing aside from maybe a couple of like blisters or like a couple of individual packages of something that came along with. But for the most part, it is really unlikely that they saw much in the way of the actual Kickstarter profits. And what that means is that the fans have this kind of unrealistic belief that we as creatives are making any of this giant pile of money that the Kickstarters are making. This was brought front and center recently when a Twitch TV show that a lot of you will recognize called Critical Role did a Kickstarter for them to turn their live streaming D&D celebrity edition thing into a cartoon, into like a professionally done cartoon. And because their followers are so rabid, and I use that term, I do not use that term lightly. I mean, these guys, like, I kind of think that if a crit roll person bites you, that you become a crit roll person. It's like lycanthropy, except with Twitch. That they raised something like, I want to say $11 million for this Twitch show. That what that has done, and I'm of two minds, is I love the exposure. I love the fact that D&D is being cast in a completely different light. That when I'm out driving Lyft with my to try and make a couple extra bucks, and I tell somebody, because they invariably ask, "Hey, is this what you do all the time?" I'm like, "No, I'm a game designer," and they go, "I'm a writer and game designer," and they go, "Oh, what video games we worked on?" And I go, "Oh, no, I do role playing games." The fact that they go, "Oh, like D&D," and it's not a turn their nose up like, "Oh, like Dungeons and Dragons in your mother's basement." The fact that it's not that we're getting this exposure is a plus. It's solid. That they're seeing these professional voice actors, these professional Hollywood types play these games and enjoying them, and showing the world that it's about the story, and it's about a camaraderie, and it's about more than just rolling dice and eating Cheetos. The fact that that's a thing has helped dramatically for the exposure to the game. Now, on the other hand, the fact that one of the faces of the game makes $11 million on a crowdfunding thing to try and effectively just got to create a cartoon that they only originally asked for $250,000 for, it adds more celebrity and more power to that part of the industry, and it leaves still the rest of us creatives in the same place. Because I guarantee that the people who are writing, the writers involved with the Critical Role and some of that background stuff and some of the D&D stuff that they're working on or whatever, I guarantee that those guys are not seeing that $11 million spike. The people who wrote D&D, or the people who are writing the scenarios that these people are playing, aren't getting, I hate to say their fair share, but they're not going to see that spike. They're not going to see, when someone says, that someone goes to a convention and says, "Oh my God, Satine Phoenix is here. Oh my God, Joe Manganiello's here. Oh my God, Matt Mercer's here." That's going to have an effect. Those people are playing games. They're awesome. They're ambassadors to the gaming circuit. But when someone says, "Oh hey," I'll use myself because I don't want to throw anybody. "Oh hey, Bryan Steele's here." They're like, "Oh really? Who's that?" Or they're going to look at that and go, "What's he been in?" And it's like, "Oh, he hasn't been in anything. He's a designer and a writer who's worked in the industry for 20 years, who's worked on a bunch of stuff that you've seen these people play." "Oh, okay. Have you seen the new Twitch channel?" call it self-centered, call it, you know, a little bit on that kind of snarky side, but seeing people use their talents as a platform to make millions because of the things you've made with your talents, and you struggle to pay your bills every month, that it can get a little grating. And I can see where this whole wage war thing popped up to further this. So getting off of the conversation with the Kickstarters and stuff, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Wendy's, the fast food company, put out a free 92-page PDF of their own role-playing game. And it's obviously heavily inspired by D&D, and it's got a lot of, you know, like you see a trope and go, I get that. But they released a source book for a fully created world. Yeah, it's tongue-in-cheek. You're fighting against Ronald McDonald and fighting in the swamp of Frosties, and like you're like, there's French fries are like weapons and things. Like, so it's a little tongue-in-cheek. But whether it's tongue-in-cheek or not, they created a source book that is as large as a lot of splat books that you see small companies risk their entire like year worth of product, or like their year's profit, on getting the right kind of art and getting this put together and published and whatnot, and then they put it out in like PDF format on drive-through, and then bite their nails hoping that it makes money. Wendy's put out a professional grade source book for their, or core rule book really, for their world, with some of the best map and art and background layouts and things that the industry has to offer. I mean, like, you flip through this, if you didn't notice that it was Wendy's, you would say, which company made this? Is this a Green Ronin thing? Is this a WotC thing? Who did this? Because it is that high of caliber of product, and they were able to do it for free because they're a multi-billion-dollar organization, and this is nothing but a tiny little marketing write-off, a little that they could do with a 0.5% of their marketing budget, that eclipses products that smaller companies have almost bankrupted themselves to create in the industry. And what that has done is that it really showed us, and on top of that, because this Wendy's thing, the power of the feast, or the champion of the feast, or something, I can't remember what it's called, the Wendy's thing, because it is so high caliber, for the next like 3 or 4 days after it came out, there were people on convention sites talking about, hey, when are we going to run this? You know, when is this going to be on, on the next convention circuit? Or, oh my God, I can't wait to run this for my friends. And then that very night, obviously a monetary sponsor involved, the guys at Critical Role ran a session of this game, this Wendy's game, on their Twitch channel. And what that does is that it really does show the rest of us, the people who are not involved, we are working really hard to make ends meet, and really hard to make these products that people want for sometimes multiple companies. It really does show that sometimes these giant mega monsters with their bazillions of dollars can just snap their fingers and suddenly trend is made. Suddenly someone got paid, and other people and attentions are drawn away. This Wendy's thing stole all media. All gaming media was talking and chatting about this Wendy's game for like 2 or 3 days straight, during which time there are people that have Kickstarters running, during which time there are people that are trying to get conventions off the ground. And they can't compete with the multi-million-dollar powerhouse that is a fast food restaurant making a role-playing game. And someone made the joke. They're like, "Oh, what's next? Pepsi the miniatures game, or I forget. It was another one of those. It was like, how long is it before more powerhouse conglomerates suck the air out of the room for the industry in order to making it harder for us? Because yeah, if Wendy's hired a game design crew, they'd probably pay them really, really well because they're Wendy's. But what does happen is now you've got somewhat smaller companies that are putting together projects. Let's say they're putting together a 92-page source book for a game they're trying to shoot for all colors, trying to make it just as awesome as this Wendy's book. But now, when the artists and everything ask for what their normal wages would be, this much smaller company might not be able to afford that same degree. And when it gets down to the hands of the fans, they might look at something they just spent $20 on and go, ugh, this is really lackluster compared to the awesome thing that Wendy's did. And again, love the idea that they did it. Think that it was fantastic that they put something together and that it's real. But I think that a free download like this could not have come at a worse time in our industry, because we are dealing with the serious dichotomy of celebrity D&D making all of the money and the creatives struggling to get by. So, what it is what it is. I've ranted enough about the wage war. I want to get back to talking about fun things, and I think next week, it's not quite Halloween week. I've got something fun planned for the Halloween, the day after Halloween channel episode. I don't remember what I've got lined up for next week, but if I think of it, I'll post it up on one of my Facebook threads or whatever. But I didn't even get into one of the other things I wanted to say today. I got kind of on my little tangent. Is I know a lot of people, a lot of gamers tend to support piracy and forgery work when it comes to this is a printout of a PDF, or this is a recast of a model made normally much more expensive. And I know a lot of gamers, through their own entitlement, feel that that's okay to buy those stolen or those copied programs or those forged miniatures or whatever. And I just want you to take a second and next time, yeah, it might save you some money, it might save you some bucks, but there is a real problem in our industry right now where not everyone is getting paid what they should be. And some of that has to do with the fact that these companies can see the utter contempt for the creations because people are stealing from their company. People are stealing the designs, printing them out on their 3D printers, creating forgeries using green stuff and their own resin, their own resin pores. There's a lot of just PDF piracy, BitTorrent sites, things like that. That it does not. Yeah, you might be saving yourself $20 or $30 or $70 or $100, but what you're saving is still inflicting damage on an industry that you should be supporting, that you should want to make better, that you should want people to feel like they're doing the right thing by working in this industry, instead of, no one can do this forever because there's no way to live off of it. That piracy and that forgery and that theft those things, although minor compared to you know, compared to Wendy's marketing team money and things like that, it is still a mentality that the bigwigs see, that they see, that they know there's going to be a certain level of this stuff that's going to get stolen. And the more money they lose from not selling those products to the people who are getting them illegally, that is more incentive for the larger companies to protect themselves by not investing as much in the product's creation, i.e. the creatives that are making it, i.e. the wages. So hence the war. So I think I ranted a lot today. Probably not my most shining moment when it comes to when it comes to topics. A lot of people probably were like, "Oh, he's just gonna whine about how, you know, nobody makes any money." I just want everybody to know that there is more to a job than money, and like I said in the beginning, the love of the job and the love of what we're creating is all the difference in the world between this and another gig that could be making more. But it doesn't change the fact that we still want to be treated fairly. We still want our fellows to be treated fairly, and our time to be spent getting what it's worth, if that makes any sense. Well, enough of this heavy garbage. It's time to move on. We're over an hour. Let's move away from today, finish out this episode, and realize that it is going to be a great weekend, and we are going to have smiles and no stress, and more than anything, we're going to get out there and we're going to play some games. See you next week.